Right, it's 3 minutes past, and there's a decent number of people connected. So let's get started. There's a fair amount of stuff on the agenda. So welcome everybody to the June 17th SIG Multicluster call. And so on the scrub today, I'll just share. Yes, the first one is the survey questions for feedback.
Yeah. Priya, you're on the call. Do you want to talk about this, or I can also? I don't hear you if you're going to. So I'm going to mention a little bit. We've been talking about this in chat. Thank you everybody for giving us your feedback. Priya has incorporated it into the actual Google form implementation of this, and we think we're ready to get people to fill it out now. So, yay! So I guess I'll add to the. I don't think there's a direct link out maybe in this doc, but so let me add it separately to the actual Google Forms implementation, which is just keep loading. Don't get distracted. Here we go. Okay, here we go. There we go. All right, so I've linked it in the notes, and I'm throwing it in the chat. Okay, it's everywhere. So we've implemented these changes into this form, and so we think that we're ready to go. So this is my official ask on behalf of everybody working on the user feedback project to please take this Google form and give it a serious fill out. Send it to any of your friends who you think would have some good insights. I'm going to send an email officially on the SIGMC Slack that has all of the TLDR and a link to the proposal as well, so people can keep the thread on that as if necessary too, and you can use that to share with your contacts or your network or whatever. After some time getting some input from SIGMC, we're going to see how it goes, and we have a plan in the proposal about some other cross postings in other Slacks, forums, environments, and the dev email list too. So yeah, that's the update and the thoughts. So if the chairs or anybody else is God, no, don't do this, Laura, no, please speak now, because we've got good energy for it. So just let me know. But we are ready for at least SIGM people here to respond, and then the mailing list as the initial round. So yeah, that's the update.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I don't have any objection.
We want your data.
Yeah. Jeremy's not saying anything, so I imagine.
I saw him smile personally.
Yeah, I'm smiling.
So.
Okay, so next topic is the hub cluster definition. Well, just switch to that tab. The position around hub cluster. So just sort of standardizing both the naming and expectations for the typical deployment model. Oh dear, it's not working. So, but there was a fair amount of discussion recently and some feedback from Karmada that's supposed to happen on Thursday. So I guess we have to wait for that. That's pretty much it as far as I'm aware.
Okay, I'm writing a note that we want to get the survey result before
Yeah.
making any changes.
So the Honkai's made the survey results available, but I'd rather
Oh, the analysis,
wait
got it.
until it's actually announced. Yeah. Yeah, and then the last one is on the credentials cap. Yeah, and I think this is pretty much ready to go. I went over it today, and yeah, there's just the markup that's broken and it's not passing tests, which is probably because I haven't checked it, but usually it's stuff like the table of contents needs to be updated. That's just minor. So yeah, I think this one's probably ready to go unless some major last minute objections turn up. So the idea is to go with a binary execution model, mostly because plugins are hard to do in Go without having to recompile.
Sorry, can you repeat that for the note?
Yeah, mostly because plugins are difficult. Well, as in something like a shared library,
Okay.
it's
Okay.
hard to do in Go without recompiling. So,
Okay.
and the exec model matches what's already done for kubeconfig.
Okay. Got it.
Actually, just to look at the cap or the implementation, I had a question on exactly how we can avoid any recompilation, because if you look at the library, there is this library. There is a function call. At least I haven't exactly figured out how you not call that function and get that. So with any function call, I assume you need to recompile. So how do you actually not recompile? At least I haven't figured out. There is the
So are you talking about the get cluster? Where is it?
I just pasted a link in the chat. So that's the real implementation. So this cap is kind of describe
All
of
right.
how we use that implementation. I just sent that in the link. So that implementation is pretty straightforward. But there is a entry point for that library. That library's entry point is kind of at if you click that file changed. Yeah, so it's under the last one, the config.go. That is the kind of the usage of this library. Yeah, so what I don't fully get is so that library used basically copy the code from client Go to run the executable. Yeah, this is the function. This is the function to call. So you get the class profile, but I don't understand is if you how do you not recompile if you have to call that function? That's the part I think. Okay, after that, it's pretty this PR is pretty straightforward. Other than some other comments there, then you basically copy paste the client Go exec function and copy that here. So we effectively this library execute that executable and get the token back. So that part I think is pretty straightforward. I don't get is how do we avoid recompile if someone needs to call? So if no one calls this function, then how? Yeah, I don't.
So well, the way is, I don't think the idea is that you'd provide multiple implementations of this. So you'd write a client that needs to talk to any cluster in the cluster set, given that with and so the client retrieves a cluster profile and then calls this function and gets back a REST config, and this function takes care of finding the right executable and running it and giving it the information and getting the result back. But there's no, if you have so you just build your application with this library, and then you could add executables alongside it to provide access to different types of clusters without needing to recompile the application.
So,
but what you could do later on, so this sort of combines, it makes it possible to have both a plugin model and an executable model, because you could have a different, well, there's no indirection here, but you could have a different implementation that provides a different build config from cluster profile, and and
now I see.
does something directly without going through an executable.
So just to be clear, to prevent recompile if you want to switch from one provider to another provider, right? The initial library you still need to. So just to be clear, for example, if we want to
just build it once.
If we want to build get multi-cluster runtime to support this, we still need to change the multi-cluster runtime to call this function. After that, it's you don't need to do it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not like we can completely avoid this. If we want to change Argo CD, we still need to change Argo CD to call this function, and then after that, it's good.
I think Owen also brings up, I think what actually the attraction to this was, which was less about how many times we recompile whatever is using this library, but that the thing that actually knows how to call for a credential that could be like any binary by anybody, that changing doesn't affect needing to recompile this.
Yes.
I think that's the advantage of I think that's the thing we're trying to avoid recompiling, because we fear that will, I don't know, fear that's strong, but I think that might change a lot.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, so I think apart from the technical stuff around the KEP, it's good to go. And in any case, the idea behind KEPs, I know it's not what happens fairly often, but still the idea behind KEPs is to iterate. So once Quarantine updates it. Oh, right, no, so there is another problem, which is the representation of certificates, authority data, but again, that's fairly technical. It doesn't really change the concepts. But yeah, there are 3 different data structures that are called cluster in client Go. One of them is used internally and can't be represented in a CRD, and that's the one that got copied into the KEP here, which breaks what we're trying to do. And there are 2 others that are, one of them's obsolete, and the other one is the current representation that is serializable. So we should probably switch to that. But yeah, those are fairly minor issues, I think. So this should be nearly good to go. Right, and I think that's it for the scrub. So we've got a bunch of other PRs that are pending, but these were the urgent ones. So we can move on to topics, I think. And Laura, you're first.
Yes. I also tried to add all this conversation into these notes since it was explicitly asked by Quarantine to record the decision. So if I'm like,
thank you very much,
misrepresented something, let me know. Okay. I have the first topic, which is logistical. I saw that Kate's has to move off Slack this Friday. There's going to be a downgrade to free tier features because I guess Slack broke up with us or something after 10 years. What I took away from it is that Kate's governance is working to record chat history in the public channels, because one of the downsides of the free tier feature downgrade is that it only keeps 90 days of history. Some of you may have experience with this in other Slacks as well. But they can't do that for your private messages. So if you have private messages going back up to 10 years, I don't know, that you would like to keep a hold of, please do so. Also, it sounds like file uploads that may be in channels are also not possible to be saved by whatever tooling that like Central Kate's is doing. So I would also highlight that. There is an announcement linked here, a README for like what channel owners should do, a GitHub discussion about where we're going. So there's also the issue of, since Slack broke up with us and we feel that we need something better, or we need some of those features that we're being downgraded off of. There's some chatter about what the next thing is. So if you have opinions about that, please take a look. Yeah, that's that topic. Any comments or questions as far as I can answer?
I have a question. Curious. This is first time I heard of that. What do you mean move off Slack so we don't use Slack anymore?
You heard it right. So if you click on this GitHub discussion for changes link, this is an open discussion about this called Slack migration. In the announcement, they even mentioned, let me pull exactly, that the CNCF project staff have proposed that our community look at migrating specifically to Discord is what is in that announcement. But if you read the discussion, you'll see that there's some other conversation about other options, some that are self-hosted. So ultimately, this is up to like the steering committee, but they're what's the word, soliciting conversation on this discussion thread. So there's actually some very interesting discussion and charts that people have made with like pro cons and stuff in there. So yeah, if you have any opinions or have good experience with other tools, I think part of it is that, like, if I understood the announcement correctly, there was like some sort of deal, with Slack regarding like being able to use enterprise for some like subsidized cost because it's open source, and that's like what is breaking down now. So there's like a cost factor that's definitely a part of it. And I think
what about CNCF? Kubernetes and CNCF, are they going to move together or?
Great question. That was not clear to me in the
I've seen it announced separately that the CNCF Slack is also getting downgraded.
The boot.
Yeah.
I have to assume that there will be, whatever change happens next will be more wide sweeping, but we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll still have Slack on Friday, but
yes,
it'll be the free Slack with the 90-day limits and whatnot.
No timeline or decisions around moving yet.
No.
Okay.
But also a very, very short window to keep any content you care about.
Yeah, and if you're doing it anyway, maybe, save content from whatever other private channels that maybe you didn't care that much about anymore, just in case somebody else was out this week, So kind of
Yeah, I
hard.
can imagine there's going to be some archival team. I've had this happen in a different community in SaltStack that got bought by VMware, which got bought by Broadcom, and they don't like Salesforce, so therefore their Slack got archived, which is always fun enterprise stuff. But essentially, everyone just did a one of those open source archival tools, and later down the line, when it was decided that they too went to Discord, everyone just brought their archives together. It was deduplicated and then imported back into Discord. So yeah, everyone doing some archival is probably going to help.
Cool. So yeah, that's what I know, and that's the announcement. Put it on your radar. Thanks.
All right, thanks. And next, so I imagine Babak's very excited. But yeah, so a while ago, actually, Jeremy and I looked at the people who'd volunteered to have a more active review role in the community and made a selection. So the goal was to have a representative group, but with no more than one person from any individual company. So thanks to everybody who volunteered, and the people we picked are, drum roll please, Ryan, Cornton, Joshua Packer, James Monolly, Honkai Ren, and Arthur. So I'll be, well, it's my evening, so Jeremy, maybe you could send an email out to the mailing list to announce that as well, and we'll be adding people as reviewers to the various owners files as appropriate.
Thank you to all the volunteers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you very much for choosing them, and I really appreciate your efforts, Leeds.
And Bobby,
Yeah,
thank
well,
you for organizing. Really.
Yeah, thank you very
Appreciate
much. Yeah, I'm sorry it took so long. It just worked out that basically Jeremy and I were traveling a lot recently, so and missing this call. So sorry about that.
I understand. Thank you.
All right, and it's back to you, Laura, for the last
Yeah.
point on the agenda. Maybe
Hi
do
again.
you want to share your
I
screen?
can share my screen. I will take control.
Once I manage to stop sharing mine.
Yeah. I need you to like literally
Yeah, I know, but I
Okay,
think
all right, cool,
yeah,
cool,
my
cool.
Zoom's crashed, so I'll
Oh,
rejoin
fun.
in just a couple of seconds.
I think I've just enabled screen sharing, maybe.
It's enabled. It's that I can't do it while somebody else is sharing, unless you give everybody
Yeah,
the power to hijack.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Power
I'm
granted.
in. Everybody calm down. We're calm. Okay, here we are. So time's up. It's June 17th, and we said that that was the last day we were going to wait for new people to show their faces on this pull request about adding the well-known property ladder. So I'm not waiting for you anymore. We're just going to talk about the things that are in here and decide amongst ourselves. There are a couple open questions that have been raised by people who put their thoughts in here, so I wanted to discuss some of them here while we've got people. I've actually peeled them out. So I'm actually going to start from the bottom because I feel like this is actually the most relevant. So overall, this whole thing is about making it possible for properties that are in the About API, but may just be like someone's personal pet property that like doesn't have any widespread adoption or obligations across the ecosystem, to escalate to through 3 stages. One is like basically a provisional stage, one is like a we like you stage, I guess, and one is like we love you stage, and everybody needs to like get on the project where they need to recognize that you're a fully fledged, well-known property and that you have special meaning in the ecosystem. So that's what this PR is fully about. And basically the suggestion is that there's some privileges that come with each of these levels, and to progress through these levels, there must be a voting mechanism for us to basically agree. So there's been some discussion about how do we vote? How do we know that we did a fair election, I guess? And this is the current proposal, which is basically that which is based on cloud event model. This is a little different from what's written in the PR. It's from one of the comments, which would be who's eligible to vote. Every entity whose member collectively kept good attendance. So this would be prioritizing SIG MC meeting attendance. I don't know if this is like what we want, but this is a suggestion. That we would need to have 2/3 of all eligible voters vote yes. So not just people who like tried, but of the qualified, like to get quorum, basically, we would need to like scrounge up, or the person who's trying to like push something through would need to like whip up enough votes to like meet this quorum as well. That there's no veto power, and actually I don't know what the cool off period is 3 months means exactly. Let me figure out what that is about.
It means basically if you didn't pass, you don't get to vote every week.
Got it. Okay, fair. So I would love to hear if there are thoughts about any of these things from the people here before I move on to the other discussion topics. I would also like to mention that like we can like try something, and then if we hate it, we can, of course, like we are in charge of the government, so we can change it. I mean, like ideally we get something that at least we feel is fair enough now, so that if we do change it later, you know, that it doesn't feel like wildly different. But I got a comment in chat that 2/3 quorum feels like a high bar. I also would like to double check what you maybe were thinking, Ryan, in the form of every entity. So are we saying that individual people are representing themselves, which is what I initially expected, or individual people are representing the company that they work at, or the school that they go to, or themselves if they're just a hobbyist? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah, Clay
so
is asking the same question.
Yeah,
sorry, in chat. Yeah.
So what I initially, again, that's copied from a cloud event
Right.
back. It's like basically if you work for some company, they all count as one vote. If you're individual one, then you are like independent hobbyists. That's count as one. School, very few are school, but if you go to the same school, I guess. I mean, still attending the same school, not just went to the same school. Still attending the same school, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know if that matters.
Sure.
But mostly it's the company, just a group. Otherwise, you know, one company can send 20 people there and then pretty much dominate any topic. So one company, one vote. If
What
we are
about
individual,
projects?
Projects.
Well, so imagine you have people from, I don't know, Microsoft and Red Hat working on Karmada, and so sometimes they'll be thinking of things as, or OCM or whatever, and sometimes they'll be thinking of things that are happening in, well, especially in this sort of scenario where a property would probably be implemented in a given project first.
Yeah.
And so the votes might be tied more to the project than to actual companies.
That association is not very strict, right? Sometimes you can, it can be associated that like the company association is relatively easy to verify and more stable. people do switch, but not like very often. Project, I
Yeah, so-
haven't thought about that.
So I suppose really the question is, who's voting? Is it
Right, entities or
projects or
individuals.
companies or individuals, etc.? Yeah.
Yeah, there's I mean, you know, this is like election stuff, right? But like if individuals are voting, then of course like popular, I guess, projects or like companies with large like open source representation, which may be for many different reasons, will have the ability to like sway a vote. Is that wrong? Is that right? That's kind of like a philosophical question, but yeah. So
There is some investment required though, because you have to attend. Well, I guess it depends. Yeah, you have to have at least one representative attending 4 meetings out of 5.
yeah, I think it
But
depends.
that's not a no-risk requirement if there are enough people in the project.
Right.
Well, it means that for individuals it's hard, but for companies or projects it's not.
Also, do we as a group feel that attendance at SIG-MC is the like de facto representation of whether you have like this type of privilege, you know?
It feels weird to me. Is there like we've always promoted this as a great way to participate, but not the way to participate. And this can be challenging for people. Whether it's people or companies, you know, a small company still like 4 to 5 is a lot.
Yeah, and you can also attend without having any meaningful participation. And it's the same
Right.
if, and even if, well, if we'd had different criteria, like for example, if you participate in discussions on KEPs, then it counts as attending, but then you have to decide what's a meaningful contribution to the discussion on a KEP.
Yeah. And I mean, like even for voting for like Kate's steering committee and stuff, like it's an imperfect system that's based on like some sliding time window, like some number of GitHub stats, because that is what is both possible to track at scale. And I think we have a little bit more flexibility here to define what this means to us for sure. But yeah, I'm not 100% sold that like attendance at the meeting is the answer. I think that can be a factor or a way. And then, yeah, having some participation on any of the SIG sponsored like sub projects, either as GitHub issues, GitHub discussions, and or in the Slack may have either full weight or varying weight if we want to get like fancy about it.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? I totally agree that just using attendance is a very rough idea.
Sure, yeah.
But it's a slippery slope. You get to all kinds
Totally.
of stuff.
Yeah.
It's just a lazy way to define things. But we can definitely go down that slope a little bit more on the caps discussions, Slack discussion of future Discord discussions. But exactly how do we define that?
Right.
Seems to be
Yeah, I do think we'll have to make a call how far down, but I do think I think it needs to be a little bit more than just meeting, and we can figure out where that line is. Like right now, it's kind of like it's like really hard because it's not clear, there's not a rubric, and it kind of boils down to like make Stephen and Jeremy say yes, but they have a lot of, you know, like control over deciding like what that means. This would be like making it more accessible, but I think somewhere in the middle of it being like so accessible that you can like game it by going to the meetings, or like leave people out by like, you know, making the meetings like hard to get to or whatever. Yeah. So this, yeah. And in short, I think of the things, that one I think is something I feel strongly we could put a little bit more sophistication around, but again, not like go too crazy because we can't deal with too much craziness.
Yeah, exactly. It has to be something that's clear enough when it's announced so that people know how to get involved in a meaningful way. And it also has to be something that can't be too easily gamed, but it can't be too complicated either.
I'm maybe Hooks will disagree, but I like to be optimistic. I'm
Yeah.
not super worried about gaming
Yeah.
here. Like,
All right, good.
really, it's about like I would blast things out on the. I mean, I'd probably just stick to a vote and blast it out on the forum, like we've done in the past for naming things. And like, if anybody's against a property being, and maybe we let it go for a while, we have a couple meetings, we talk about it. If anybody's really against the promoting something, that should be very strong signal. We have that question about deprecation. I don't like deprecation in general. I think if we're going to promote something to like a core property, we should be very against removing it. And we should have enough evidence that it's going to be there for a long time. So I expect that this is going to be very rare.
Yeah, I do want to just go back to like using past examples of how we've done naming things as like the baseline criteria. I think is not fair, because this is asking implementers, like, we're telling you to be part of this, you have to do work. And like, I think to some degree that's true for like naming at like a point in time, but this is like expected like over time. So I feel like it doesn't have to be crazy, but I do feel like the bar is a little higher than what we may have done before regarding
I
naming
do agree,
surveys.
but I guess like no's from the peanut gallery are a pretty strong
Sure.
signal. Like we should have a lot of yeses and no nos if something's going to be core. Mike.
Yeah, Mike has an opinion, or at least a data point, which is that to advance from experimental to standard is conformance in 3 implementing projects rather than people voting for you.
But you kind of like that, is like get people to do the implementation first so that it's not being thrust on you.
I mean, the way that ours is set up, you like, how to say, like you can make additional properties all the time anyway. So
Right.
like that's not a like you don't need to go through like the API process. So we don't need to be monitoring that step where like you have implementations early on in the same way that Gateway API does.
Right. But I mean, like
Yeah.
if I wanted a property to be standard, like a good bar would be that I've first been able to successfully get multiple implementations to adopt it.
Yeah, that's basically the intent. Is like you pitch something, you build it experimental, you do your own implementation, and convince a few others to build a similar implementation. And once you kind of have that critical mass, then it's like, okay, this is something that is worth proposing to be standardized because we have sufficient common functionality already.
All right, I'm going to put a little note here. So what we're saying is like there's a way we could back up and we could say it's not about voting, it's about some like threshold criteria that we decide here that
Right.
like is like a rubric that people can follow, or is like a checklist that they have to like meet.
Right. And in my mental model, the advantage to this kind of approach is that like our goal with standardizing something is saying, hey, tool builders, you can rely on this. Once a critical mass of projects have implemented something, chances are a tool builder might start relying on it. And so it would be just formalizing the thing that might be happening anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is like definitely a perspective. I think overall this KEP has been coming from the point of view of that this is less about formalizing and more about, I mean, like it is about formalizing, but in the way that you're saying that like there's a type of formalization that's like, I don't know if rubber stamp is the word because that has its own like connotations, but like that something is like bureaucratic basically because it already is existing in the world and we're all like, oh, we're just, like tying the ribbon on it or something. Or if it's like this is about establishing this is the direction that we're going in. People like get on board. We're like working on this together. And I feel that's what the original intent of the property letter cap was. So, I mean, we could decide that that's not how we want to do it, but I think that was the impetus in the first place, was to be more of an encouraging factor than a like just like not just, but you know, the step you do at the courthouse or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I guess for me, the important thing out of this conversation is that the implementers have maybe the bulk of the say.
Okay, yeah, fair.
And I'm quite happy if it's either because they've already done it and that's the measure, or because they vote. But maybe it's like, yeah, it would be weird to be in a situation where like someone who wishes a property existed and can say every implementer must do this, but none of the implementers want it, and
Right.
And we kind of force that work on everyone. It just seems like that's not likely to end up in a successful place.
Okay. I just want to touch a few of these other things. And of course, this conversation can happen in the PR some too. I'll move all of these comments that I just happened to do in the meeting notes into the PR so it's clear. But there was some questions about versioning. If that's something that we should support or expect, that each individual property might have a different version. This kind of dovetails a little bit with this question of deprecation and removing property process. If we decide that one it should be broken up with, what can we do? I was thinking about how like the API, the like core Kubernetes API requires things to be like back compatible with kubelet, a certain amount of versions, but this requires us to know both what's the version of kubelet and what's the version of this API. And I'm not sure how in sync implementers of the About API are in terms of like how they version things versus how we version this thing. So those are some technical caveats, I guess, and then also just the open question of how people think of what people think about the idea of properties having a version that other things could detect and like make different logical decisions about, and how important that is. Here is also where this kind of came up. Any thoughts? Brain empty, no thoughts. Head empty, no thoughts. Also, valid situation.
Trying to think about what versioning could look like.
Right. Because part of the design of About API was to be very kind of like open-ended about some of this stuff in terms of it's just like pure schema. So this would be definitely like, if depending how like serious we would want to get about it, we would either be saying that your value always needs to have some version data in it of some form, or we would be making like a field that tracks this, and then that's everybody's problem. And then, yeah, I guess like the thought experiment of like what that means for like how that can actually be used by implementers.
I mean,
yeah.
there's one thing to say that we could just even, if we want it to just be a running log rather than versioned per se. I mean, we could just tag with the date when we accept new, when the definitions change, and just refer to, you know, something like a date string if we don't want to follow any sort of versioning and have any opinion on it, I guess. But that seems strange to me as a consumer.
Yeah, I think it's not that we're like against, like that's just another type of versioning, right? So I think it's whether like we're versioning at all, and then the specifics of how we version, whether it's like with a field that follows like semantic versioning or a date or whatever, I think we could like decide what that is, or if it's like embedded in the value. you know, those are all kind of like, we can debate the particulars of that, but I think we're even just at the step of like, is it important to us to have well-known properties have a version that is known by, like, is blessed, or I don't know, somehow like official from the perspective of like the SIG. Like right now, the two well-known properties, cluster name and cluster set, don't really have anything to say about what the like intrinsic version of their own like data is, like their data schema is. Just yeah.
I'm gonna go on a limb and say probably we probably need some.
Probably.
Yeah.
Okay.
To say my implementation follows that is rather hard, especially if my implementation becomes 10 years old and hasn't been touched for a decade. It may have once followed it, but it probably doesn't work anymore.
Right.
This is the problem Argo CD got themselves in. They decided not to version the CRT because it would be easier to just re-release it with the same version. And now they're trying to reverse and add versioning back into it. So yeah, you're probably going to end up versioning. So you might as well do it now because it's really hard to do it later on.
Okay, and this this may end up being spun off in terms of like whether this is a hard blocker on figuring out this property ladder, like voting or progression mechanism, versus like splitting that off into like another debate, including all of our technical debates on where exactly this information lives. So just heads up. But yeah, good. Thanks for the temperature check. And I'll take one more topic, which is backup to deprecation and removing property. I know, Jeremy, you, the ever faithful optimist, was like, we love everything that we make. So noted, acknowledged.
Not actually because of that. If we look at the like broad enterprise market using Kubernetes, once you build something, you generally want it to just last a long, long time. And tracking that things you rely on might disappear on you is a lot of work, and can cause a lot of churn and cost a lot of money. So we do need a deprecation policy. We should probably learn as much as we can from the core Kubernetes deprecation policy, but in general, if we make something core, we should be pretty certain that's not going to be necessary.
Any other strong feelings about this at this stage in our lives? Okay. Yeah, so I think there's still like fertile conversation to be had, but I definitely think we're not waiting for like new people to show up. So like basically y'all who just talked to me and the people who are talking on the PR, you're basically the only people I care about right now. So congratulations. And hopefully we can, amongst us, we can find something that's more of a fair election process than what I'm basically doing to produce the government. But we all start somewhere, so that's fine.
Love it.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Laura.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and that's the end of the agenda. So unless someone has a last minute topic to bring up.
More of a question, I did post it in chat, but if you have individual properties that are versioned, does it mean that you essentially get two versions? The version of the release of the API, but also individual versions of the properties, or are they always bundled together with a specific version?
I would imagine that those are separate ideas, and that's partially because specifically for the About API, the like schema is like really simple, but also like that's tracked with like the version number from like the CRD system, whereas what we're talking about would be a versioning process on top of that that is per like name value pair, like specially named value pair. And so that would be like a whole other set of versions, and each thing could be in its own version, could be tracking like its own version separately from each other.
Yeah, that does create a lot more flexibility.
Just before we leave, I think I see a bunch of new names in the attending list. I don't know if or maybe some of them left. Like Owen String. I don't know if I if
Calling
we
people out
actually
and making
Yeah,
them
we're in the
comfortable.
Ryan wants to make new friends portion of the meeting. So if you would like to become friends with Ryan, or otherwise say who you are, if you feel like you haven't gotten a chance
and
to
I
meet
have the
people.
same question as Mike. There's a kick flyers who's being how do we add? Is that an automatic bot or it's
Yeah, it joined
because I'm
just
not
after
sure.
me. I was 5
But,
minutes
it's
early, and it just joined by itself.
Yeah, it is an automatic bot. The SIG, like the host has to like do something to kick it.
I
okay,
can introduce myself quick.
All right.
Yeah, I'm Owen Strain. I've been to a handful of meetings now. I'm at Google. I work with Corentin and let's see, Bobby and who at least was in here. Andrew Peabody also who's here. Yeah, and I'm kind of new to Multicluster, but hoping to participate more. So nice to meet everyone.
Welcome.
thank you.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Greetings.
You really are going to scare people away, Laura.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Laura, at least aren't you at Google as well? So, you know, they can find you if necessary.
Yeah,
and be
that's
like,
true.
"No,
They can
she's normal,
find
she's
me.
reasonable."
Yeah, I do look normal IRL.
Your meeting persona is definitely very different than at KubeCon London.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Well, on that note, let's call it a day. I'll see some of you on on Thursday's APAC friendly call. And the
All
rest
right.
of you on one of these calls. Have a good
Thanks, everyone.
rest of the week. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.